And this was a moment that I don't want anyone to miss. It was this insight that you had, which was if you use a parallel dialer as a tool, that's going to allow you to do a large volume of connects. The connects on those calls on repeat, calling the list over and over, that's going to be valuable for you. It's the data on the back end that you're going to collect from doing that.
If you just do buckets 101 and you call everybody on a list and you get a 3% connect rate, and then you move it to a priority lead and you follow up with it, you'll still see those people who pick up again and again, and people who don't. Now, there's other signals that can determine someone's probability of picking up, which is all baked into the algorithm.
Welcome back to another edition of Outbound Fluff No Sales. This episode is going to be a little unique. Ryan is going to share with us the founding story of how Phone Ready Leads came to be. Stay tuned for this one. As always, if you enjoy this, hit subscribe or let us know in the comment section below if you hate it or love it. I'm Ronan Pesar. This is Ryan Reisert, and we're the Outbound Operators.
Let's dig in, baby.
By the way, we're live on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So all these videos that are on YouTube are making their way over to the streaming services. So someone had asked for that in one of our previous videos.
When are we going to stream live on TikTok? I just got an alert that my TikTok allows for lives now.
Your TikTok. You want to go TikTok live?
We could TikTok live it.
I don't understand TikTok. I don't know. Unless you're doing like a 7-second video that's viral in China, I don't see how you're going to ever get traction on TikTok.
I don't know, man, but I don't really understand it either. And I have like a lot more followers than I would imagine. And I'm really shitty at that kind of content. So it's just like a bunch of random shit.
All right. Well, today we're going to do story time with Ryan and Ronan. And our story will not be about our sponsor, Callblitz, but I'm going to wear the Callblitz hat. If you don't know what Callblitz is, by the way, check it out, callblitz.com. Virtual sales floor for cold callers. There's a community in there. There's amazing promotions. If you're a real cold caller and you do it every day, you can get the whole thing for free by signing up for the Dial Hard Challenge. You have to cold call for 90 days in a row, and you get the whole thing reimbursed, and you get entered to win $5,000. Callblitz.
Oh, that reminds me, I need to complete my Dial Hard Challenge for today.
Ryan almost got knocked out today. Almost didn't dial hard.
I did my dials. I just have to post it, you know.
Oh, okay. And you got a 1 in 10 chance of actually winning the $5,000. That's the cool part.
At this point, it's probably going to be less because we only have like 2 people that are on track. So
nice. Well, today in our episode of Outbound Fluff No Sales, we're gonna take a rewind, step into the time machine, and ask Ryan a little bit about his history, because Ryan has built and sold a company that you may know today as TitanX. We talk about it a lot on this channel, but it used to be called Phone Ready Leads. And in fact, Ryan's the guy who started it. And if we take a trip down memory lane and start at the beginning, it could be interesting for our viewers to kind of understand why it got started in the first place. What was the problem you were trying to solve? But take us back, Ryan, to the moment you realized that there is a business opportunity that eventually became Phone Ready Leads.
So let me take you back to 1917 when the phone. No, I'm just kidding. So for those who probably don't know the whole history, right? I started my sales career in 2008 as a lead generation specialist back in the day. Those are what we call SDRs now, but back then there was none of this sales acceleration industrial complex bullshit that existed on the market. So from the first day I started calling, well, I wouldn't say the first day. Once I got over the fact that I sucked really bad at calling and I started to get okay at calling, I realized very quickly that when you're making calls, nothing really matters unless you're actually talking to somebody. If you look at most sales training, there's a shit ton of bullshit out there around like voicemails that get callbacks and shit. Like none of that stuff matters. Like you only have success when you actually talk to somebody. And so literally in 2008, I started developing a process, which I wrote about in Outbound Sales No Fluff, called buckets, which allows you to actually understand who on a list is closest to a conversation, and you start working it backwards. You know, I've been doing this since the beginning of my career. I've been really focused on how do I, when I show up as a rep, my North Star is if I'm not in a conversation, I want to make a couple clicks to be my next best conversation. That's always been what I've been after. Okay. So fast forward as I worked from lead generation to sales rep to sales leader, I've always been after what are the right systems, tools, anything I could get my hands on data to try to execute this vision. Right. If I'm a rep, if I'm not talking to someone, I want to click a few buttons and I'll be in my next conversation. Back then it was literally pounding a few buttons on the phone, but the whole gist is there. So it's not like I showed up with this concept overnight, right? I've been just maniacal about trying to figure out how the fuck do I get my sales people once I become a sales leader or me as a sales rep into a conversation as efficiently as possible. So when you start to run the process, you realize that, dials create conversations. When you really start to dissect the dial, you learn a lot of things. For the longest time, I thought you just had to make more dials to get conversations, and so I got stuck on
Mm.
the auto dialer path, right? So one of the first tools that I instituted way back in the day was um, InsideSales.com. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
remember them, but
Zant. That's
it's
what they
Zant.
became.
It became
Zant.
I kept become Zant, but I don't even. They fizzled out. They also raised
They were
like
like
a
one of the
hundred.
early SCPs that were up against Outreach,
No,
Sales Loft,
no, they were before
Yes
them.
Where.
They were way before them.
Oh,
They were before them. Those tools didn't exist. Yes, where it came after the fact, but InsideSales.com integrated into Salesforce, and you could like rapidly call through numbers. It was really great. And so started realizing that, okay, well, if you have some technology, you can make more dials. And then,
so yeah. Hey, this is fun. I can do this now to Ryan.
yeah, stop talking.
So the first moment of Little Ryan's. I like calling you Little Ryan. I feel like that's Ryan's actually pretty tall. I mean, what are you, like 6'2", 6'3"?
No, I'm
Um,
6'1", but
I
that's
mean,
only because
you feel tall to this small
that's
little
only
Jewish
because you're
kid
like
here. I'm like
5'2",
5'9" and a
5'3".
half.
That's because you're like 5'2",
But I play
5'3".
basketball like I'm 6'11". Anyway, little Ryan's there dialing bloopity boopity, and he's like, "Wow, this taking forever." And then here comes this revolutionary software. It wasn't that revolutionary. This software that lets him click, call, click, call, click, call, and you're like, volume. It's the name of the game. By the way, a lot of people still run with that strategy that you
No, for
use.
sure. Of course they do, because like what else are you going to know until you actually start
Yeah,
to
just do
understand
more.
it? So
Just do more.
do more, do more, do more. So then that's what I used for a long time. Used that throughout my career up until I was, well, different dialers showed up for auto dialing,
Yeah.
and whatever it might come. Outreach comes to the mix, and that became the sequencer where you could call and send emails, and that was pretty cool for a
That
minute.
got a little uncomfortable. Sorry. Just
You got
put
another
your
one
phone
coming
down.
in. That got cool for a minute. And then I started after I was a sales leader at Bushaka, we got acquired by Sprinkler. I started a sales training company, a boot camp, one of the first boot camps, inside sales boot camps. And when I started that company, I got introduced to a bunch of cool sales leaders, one of them being Chris Beal, who was at Connect and Sell. And Connect and Sell is the parallel dialer. They've been around for a long time, and it completely blew my mind. It was like, holy
Yeah.
shit. Not only does it imagine being able to click the call, but have 10 people behind you. So they're click the call all at the same time until someone picks up. Boom, big breakthrough. It's like, holy shit, volume on volume. Amazing. Okay. So use that. It was
And so
incredible.
Ryan just ran you through like a bunch of years of experience, including a sale of a company. Was that you were VP of sales when you left Bushaka, right?
There was three acquisitions actually during that time. Yeah. I was the
Bushaka was one of them.
yeah, Bushaka was one of them. Yeah. But I used this system in the process and it worked, and I built up
And
sales
then
teams, and they got acquired along the way.
your connection over to Chris and Connect and Tell. By the way, I also got to know Chris. He's actually a really good dude.
Amazing, dude.
All my interactions with him have been, yeah, I admire him. He kind of has a very humble approach to what he does, and he approaches things with integrity. Now the rest of his company,
That's a different story. So Connected Cell was this big game changer. It's like parallel, human assisted parallel dialing. Amazing, right? You click a button, it's all going in the background and conversations connect. And it was incredible. I built and sold Inside Sales Bootcamp using that. It was a crazy experience for that. And then I shifted over to a business I started called The Sales Developers, where we would install Connect and Sell, and very similar to what we're doing with Outbound
it's a
Operators
great
now, but
play. It's a
install
great
Connect and
business.
Sell and Outreach. And it was like this robo spam cannon. And what I quickly realized there was we're doing literally our team across the different accounts. We were doing probably 250,000 dials a month. And I started to collect a shit ton of data. And I realized that in my process in buckets, right, you make a call until you get somebody on the phone. Once you get somebody on the phone, they become a priority lead. When you become a priority lead, you focus on them before you go to your follow ups. But when we started calling priority leads, realized now that we had like real big data and I wasn't like running a bunch of sales teams, I'm running a business now. I want to think about how do I make things as efficient as possible. I was like, pretty consistently, the priority leads always have a 20 to 30% connect rate. And then the cold list always
Mm,
has like a 2 to 3% connect rate. And when I'm calling through connected cell because it's parallel dialing, I'm actually like connecting with multiple people at the same time. That's kind of a waste. I want to just dial one to one on those because that's like, how do I throttle down my dials now? Because once I
yeah.
have people who pick up, they always pick up. They pick up again and again and again and again and again. And the other stuff, we got to waste. What we did at the sales developers is we used connect and sell to get the first connect, and then we would use phone burner to do the follow-ups. And that's how we enabled our system. And while I was building the sales developers, we raised some money. We acquired a data company. We were building lists, and I started to program connect and sell in this way. And I came up with this concept that we were doing called data as a service, where it's like I could take your list and then give you really good data, and you could get just the data. You could get the data enriched, or you could get like the ultra premium, which was like priority follow-ups or almost like, activations as we talk about today. And that kind of sizzled out a little bit because the investor that we had wanted us to just focus on our core business. But I was
Mm.
really fascinated with like the number one problem with all the stuff we're doing right now is companies aren't getting into enough conversations. And this whole tech stack shit is super complicated. And anyway, I ended up exiting sales developers
What
that
year was it when you started having this realization that the priority leads were connecting at a 20% rate? But
2017, 2018.
okay, this is wild. Around that time, actually, it was just a year later. Just a year later was my first introduction to Connect and Sell in 2019,
Yep.
where I was about 2 years into working at a company called Security Scorecard. Oh, I've got a hat from them too. Hey, here's the proof. It says 17 on it because this was my year where I got hired. When I started there, it was like 40 people, like 5 million ARR. 2 years into it, we had already started growing really fast.
Hmm.
I don't remember exactly where we were, but something happened where the business started plateauing a little bit. And our CEO, who is a self-described chess player, he's actually a ranked chess player. He's very good. He's very strategic, thinks long term. He puts out a challenge to the whole company. He's like, anyone who can help us figure out how to like 10x our business, like I'm going to invest in that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take on that challenge. I just read Grant Cardone's 10x rule, which there was nothing valuable about it other than just the basic
Do
concept
more.
where just think with an extra zero at the end of everything you do, and then your experiments become more interesting. That was the
Mm.
takeaway from the book. You don't have to read it now.
Yeah.
And about 3 months earlier, a little company called Dialbot had emailed my colleague who was overseeing the brand new inside sales team. They were like mid-market sellers, field sellers, and I was doing SDR. I had a team of about like 20 at that time. And she forwarded an email to me. It goes, hey, you might want to check this thing out. It looks interesting. It's parallel dialer. I remember that. All the people out there who are like, they'll never forward the email. Well, so I actually remembered that. And I pulled up the email. I do some Googling and I found another company called Connect Leader and this one called Dialbot. So I reached out to both. And I did a little more digging and I saw a third company called Connect and Sell. I'm like, all right, let me also reach out to them. Long story short, we end up trialing all three. All three are parallel dialers. Dialbot later became Orem. Connect Leader later became Concert with a K,
Yeah.
and Connect and Sell, so Connect and Sell. All three are major parallel dialer players. Pre-Nux, by the way. Nux wasn't even around yet. Those guys were still in high school. And what ended up happening was, at least for the first 3 months of using it, we hit that directive from the CEO and literally had like almost 10x our connects. Our output was going through the roof. Things were going wonderful till they hit a wall. But that's the end of
Yeah.
that story for now.
Well,
Back to your story.
Well, that's a part of this story, which is when you're using these systems and you actually start to look into the data, you realize that the benefit of the high velocity dialing is not having your reps sitting on the high velocity dialing. It's the data associated with the high velocity dialing, the intelligence behind that data, which could be operationalized in a better way
Mm.
circa buckets, which I've been running for years anyway, that if you actually unlock some of the hidden information behind it, it could be extremely valuable. Now, the difference between Dial Bot and Connect and Sell and Concert, there's also Monster Connect at the time, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
is that Concert, Monster Connect, and Connect and Sell, they all do human assisted dialing
Right.
where dialbot's AI dialing. And so what you really want is the data from every single attempt because it's extremely valuable. And I can't give away all the secrets, but some of them, if you go read Outbound Sales No Fluff and Buckets, there's some of the validation process that's in there. But there's an incredible amount of information you can get when you make a dial to determine if a number is worth dialing again or not. And so I just exited the sales developers and I went to Chris Beal and I said, "Hey, I've been doing this with your system. We should build this with Connect and Sell. I think it can unlock a tremendous amount of market value because Connect and Sell and all these other dialers have the same problem that you just talked about. People buy the system, they go and run through their addressable market, and then they don't
Mm.
renew. They have a huge churn issue because they're like, we're not getting the value
Mm.
anymore. But
Yeah.
they're not sharing why, right? Because Connect and Sell is pretty good at educating their people on their follow-ups. In fact, Connect and Sell had like a baked-in follow-up list. So you would log in, do your follow-ups, and then you do the cold calling, which is super smart. That's why I liked using it with all the systems I've set up. But there's the mechanism inside of Connect and Sell. If you looked at their backend report, for anyone who's still using the system, you can do this today. You go into the report section, they have a ton of them, but there's one called the outcomes report. And the outcomes
Hmm.
report, you can look at your rep attempts and you can look at the agent attempts. If you actually look at the agent attempts, it breaks down basically the basics of validation, which will tell you which numbers are probably bad, which ones are getting blocked by gatekeepers, and then also the differences between like a direct verified and a direct not verified, if you know how to read the data properly.
So
But
wait,
then
let me
they
get this
also
right.
have a mechanism which is extreme amount of waste, which is it's called user not available. And
Mm.
that artifact right there, it's about 20 up to 30% of all dials because people click pause, or when a connect happens, you lose that data. I said, I want to unlock that data so that we can make this thing more intelligent. So I went to Connect to Sell and I started to educate them on some of these things. We're doing some experiments. In fact, Jerry just talked about it this morning about remembering those days. And I was very intrigued working with their backend, using some of their extra usage. Long story short, I was showing when I was there at Connect to Sell as a consultant during the pandemic, I was showing customers that you could reduce the amount of dials you needed to use in Connect and Sell by about 80% and increase their actual production by 30 something percent because I was using Connect and Sell similar to what I was doing at the sales developers, and then having people just use Connect and Sell on a one-to-one, they call it Connect on Live Voice. So eliminate the humans and just dial these people that we already know pick up. And it was
So
incredible.
this, Ryan, was the big insight. And this was a moment that I don't want anyone to miss because it was kind of the key thing that is, if you're going to walk away with anything from understanding the difference between these technologies and why the approach of using phone validation before you call is so much more valuable, it was this insight that you had, which was if you use a parallel dialer as a tool, that's going to allow you to do a large volume of connects. The connects on those calls on repeat, calling the list over and over, that's going to be valuable for you. It's the data on the back end that you're going to collect from doing that, which is going to start to identify a few things about the list that you just put in. Bad data, people you actually reached, and everything in between. And what you're saying is that it hit you like a sack of bricks, that this insight allowed you to unlock something that Connect and Sell didn't like because it went against their pricing model. But it's something that is valuable for any operator who's doing outbound, which is you can make fewer dials on round 2 and beyond of these calls when you take the people who have already answered the follow-ups and everything like that and just call them one by one. You're
Correct.
able to get that higher connect rate. And this is the underlying thesis that eventually became Phone Ready Leads.
That's right. And there's a lot of nuances that go into
Right.
what TitanX does today. There's a lot more into the system. It's not just a lot of people would be like, well, what do you just call and hang up on people? That's not how it works. There's a lot of things you can get from attempts, but
And people still ask me that question today
yeah,
when I get on with people. They're like, what exactly are they doing? Do they just call and hang up?
yeah,
Is that all the calls I get?
yeah, that's I mean that's not what that's not the thesis, but the idea if you just do buckets 101 and you call everybody on a list and you get a 3% connect rate and then you move it to a priority lead and you follow up with it, you'll still see those people who pick up again and again, and people who don't. Now there's other signals that can determine someone's probability of picking up, which is all baked into the algorithm. But the main takeaway here is the data is being hidden. Connect and Sell sells dials. They didn't want to do this. And so eventually I said, look, if you don't want to do it, I'm going to do it. So I took what I was already doing at the sales developers and launched Phone Ready Leads with this idea that after after having access to literally millions and millions and millions of dials and understanding all of the different types of numbers, time of day, all this other shit that people try to look into, and my bucketing methodology that I've used for years, I created essentially a predictive algorithm that can help me understand from every single dial attempt, looking at the data based on that dial attempt, the probability of the next attempt becoming a person you should call versus person you shouldn't call. And by recreating the back end concept of connect and sell to be a frontline human validation element, plus intermixing data that you can collect on lists over a period of time, as the amount of data that gets processed through the system continues to collect, the algorithm gets smarter and smarter and smarter. Plus, you have all these signals into the market. And now all of a sudden, you got this system that's extremely, extremely predictive on once I have a list, that number, do I know if it's going to pick up with a 20 to 30% connect rate at scale. And so that's really how it all came together. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to cut out their cost per dial model and change it to a cost per conversation model, which would have been super simple. They also didn't believe that the long tail impact of this idea that on any given list, there's actually 3 types of leads: bad data, we know that exists; workable data; and reachable data. There's still this cruckety old concept that people believe that the people who pick up early and often are not the ones that you really want to be connecting with, which is just isn't true. There are people that will pick up and there are people that won't pick up, and you're going to waste a shit ton of time, energy, and resource trying to go after this very long tail of a list. And, that's where Connect SL was making all their money, is people sitting there and watching their connect rates go from 5% to 3% to 2% to 1%, and then sitting there on this 1% dial to connect rate, and then sharing dashboards about how they made 1,000 dials today, but only connect with 10 people, and
Yep.
celebrating that.
Yep.
And that what they don't understand is that there was 8 hours of rep labor to get to the 10 connects. That is a complete waste of time. If you re-operationalize the backend and use the data in the proper way, you can get into a position where my North Star that I thought about 17, 18 years ago is actually attainable. I take a list, I click 2 or 3 times, and I'm in another conversation. Literally, I just started this whole session with, I got to do my dial hard. The dial hard today, made 10 dials, connected with 3 people, and that happens over and over and over and over and over again.
And I think that's one of the most misunderstood benefits. I love that it's your North Star. I mean, it's what we've built at the Outbound operators with our Outbound engine, where it's 3 clicks and the sales rep is in their next best conversation.
Sometimes 7.
And if it's not 3 clicks, it's because you're going to go do another 2 or 3 before the next person picks up. But every 3 to 5 dials, you're pretty much connecting, maybe 6 dials. I was the person Ryan just described, because the end of my story ends the way he just told it. It got to a point where we had rolled out Connect and Sell through the pandemic, same time he was discovering what he discovered, to about 60 reps, field sales reps, inside sales reps, SDRs. Everyone was calling. And the trend started to become kind of like this nightmare where I would have reps making 500, 600, 700 dials every day. But what they were doing during that time was not a lot of talking. They were spending that time just recycling through people who had never answered and will most likely never answer again. And when I noticed that that's what was happening, I became disillusioned with the earlier success I thought we had reached, when initially it seemed like, oh, wow, we're getting a lot of conversations, because I realized that there was something really broken about that model when you just go try to do more. Because at the end of the day, when you roll out a do more strategy in Outbound, you're just going to get more of the bad with the good. And if the majority of the work that you're doing is bad, aka I'm calling numbers of people who never pick up, that's most of what you're going to do more of. And that's exactly what I saw. Hopefully you enjoyed this edition of Outbound Fluff No Sales. It's a little bit of a, what do we call it? The hero story, the origin story of Phone Ready Leads, which Ryan built around 2020. Later sold it. Now it's TitanX. And just today, they announced a $27 million Series A fundraise. Very exciting news. I'm sure, Ryan, that means a lot to you, as it's your brainchild and baby. And I know you're still very involved, even though we don't have any actual equity in the business. But we're still very involved in rolling out the same strategy using TitanX with all of our clients. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. If you hated it, also let us know. But as always, I'm Ronen. This is Ryan. We're the Outbound Operators, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Peace.